Hello, I'm Father Nick Henshaw. I'm the Vicar of St Thomas's, Groombridge, in the lovely High Weald of East Sussex. And this is the third in a series of addresses for our Lent course on the Psalms. The third week, and we're looking particularly at the Psalms of Lament, those Psalms where people speak out of this extraordinary depth of their human experience. The great Hebrew scholar and Bible translator Robert Alter, who I've already quoted several times in this course, comments in his translation of the Psalms, throughout the ages, Psalms has been the most urgently personally present of all the books of the Bible in the lives of many readers. He qualifies that, not every reader, I get it, but what a beautiful line. Throughout the ages, Psalms has been the most urgently personally present of all the books of the Bible in the lives of many readers. I think that's a beautiful and extraordinary judgment, which would be endorsed by millions both of Christians and Jews down 3 millennia, for whom the Psalms have been central to their daily prayer, central to daily prayer today in the Christian and Jewish traditions. And they are texts, as we've already explored, that give us permission to bring our deepest desires, our most passionate praises, and our darkest thoughts into the presence of the Lord. Just to recap on a few bits and pieces, I do this each week, I know, with different bits of the story, but this is a collection of 150 liturgical poems, i.e. poems or songs intended to be used in worship, both corporate and personal. They're developed over many centuries, developed rather than written. Our modern understanding of an author is, well, precisely that, modern, and is a misunderstanding with most ancient literature. These are the songs of a community or communities, developed and shaped by those communities. Liturgical poems formed in community and sometimes over many centuries. And as we've said again and again, but again I'll say it again, given that the Psalms are often known as the Psalms of David, we may of course find the question about authorship puzzling. However, even if David did compose some of the Psalms, and that still is a matter of debate down the centuries, the Psalms themselves tell us a different story about different named authors and composers, and indeed 48 of the Psalms have no indication of an author whatsoever. So here, for completeness, it is a breakdown. Yes, 73 of the Psalms are said to be by David, 12 by Asaph, 11 by the sons of Korah, 1 by Heman with the sons of Korah, 2 by Solomon, 1 by Moses, 1 by Ethan the Ezrahite, and 48 are anonymous. So more of these psalms are anonymous than are ascribed to David. Now, that can feel very frustrating to us. We love to know the background and the biography. But as I say, that's a very modern obsession and not the concern of the Old Testament writers. Let's remember that although we give the traditional names Matthew, Mark, Luke and John to the 4 Gospels, none of those Gospels make that claim. Certainly none of the Gospels are signed by their authors. That said, about the Psalms, some of them do have a very clear context. Psalm 118 is very clearly a processional psalm on a day of festival, presumably at the temple, and has been used in the Christian church, particularly on Sunday mornings, as a celebration of going up to the temple, to the church, if you like, to celebrate God's presence. Psalm 137, by the rivers of Babylon, very clearly is set in the context of reflection on the exile, that moment in the 6th century, that time in the 6th century when Jerusalem is destroyed and the people are carted off to a foreign city. But even when we can pin down the context, the glory of the Psalms is precisely that they seem to speak out of the human condition as a whole and of our relationship with God in any context. As we've also seen, a further complicating factor is these are texts gathered in the Psalms over some 1,000, from 1000 BC to around 600 BC. And therefore there are inevitably variations of context and theology. And even there, it seems clear that some psalms have been amalgamated, some have been added, some have been subtracted from, some put together. That, if you're worried about it, is why some Bibles and some copies of the Psalms have different number sequences, because in some traditions some psalms are amalgamated and in others they are not. I could of course go on at greater length, but let's just note there is no clear organisational principle in the collection of the Psalms. But there are some distinct groups, such as the Psalms of Ascent, presumably associated with going up to Jerusalem. That's Psalms 120 to 134, which have really got a place in the daily prayer of the church. And the great cosmic history Psalms, 102 to 107. And indeed the final group of Psalms, 146 to 150, which are continuous poems of praise and thanksgiving, and which gives the book the name by which they are known, certainly in the Hebrew. Praises, praises. Anyway, I think we need to move on to today's psalm as we continue this sequence through these sometimes gut-wrenchingly moving psalms of lament. Psalm 102, one psalm this week, one psalm standing on its own, but what a psalm. The longest of all the psalms we'll be looking at in this course, and one whose imagery is enormously powerful. So here we go. The traditional title, A Prayer for the Lowly When They Grow Faint and Pour Out Their Plea Before the Lord. As we know, the titles may well be later additions to the text. Here we go. Hear my prayer, Lord. Let my cry reach you. Do not turn from me in my hour of need. When I call, listen, answer me at once. For my days dissolve like smoke, my bones are burned to ash. My heart withers away like grass, I even forget to eat. So consumed am I with grief. My skin hangs on my bones. Like a gull lost in the desert, like an owl haunting the ruins, I keep a solitary watch, a lone bird on a roof. All day my enemies mock me. They make my name a curse. For bread I eat ashes. Tears salt my drink. You lifted me up in anger and threw me to the ground. My days pass into evening, I wither like the grass. But you, Lord, preside forever. Every age remembers you. Rise with mercy for Zion, for now is the time for pity. Your servants treasure every stone. They cherish even the rubble. Nations will fear your name. Your glory will humble kings. When you rebuild Zion's walls, you will appear in glory, Lord. You hear the homeless pleading, and do not mock their prayer. Write this down for those to come, a people created to praise our God. The Lord watches from on high, searches the earth from heaven. God hears the prisoner's groan and sets the doomed free to sing the Lord's praise in Zion. God's praise in Jerusalem. There the nations and peoples gather to serve the Lord. God has broken me in my prime, has cut short my days. I say, my God, do not take me. My life is only half spent, while you live from age to age. Long ago, you made the earth. The heavens too are your work. Should they decay, you remain. Should they wear out like a robe, like clothing changed and thrown away, you are still the same. Your years will never end. May your servant's line last forever. Our children grow strong before you. Well, by now in this series of reflections on the Psalms, even under that common title of the penitential Psalms, we've begun to see something of the uniqueness of each of these Psalms. Psalm 6, a visceral, heartfelt plea to God. Psalm 32, the same experience but now recounted after the event, so to speak, reflecting on what has happened, how it felt and what it meant. Psalm 38, another direct plea with increasingly dense and graphic imagery. And then Psalm 51, still a clear plea for mercy, but with a much more level, analytical tone. So what marks today's psalm out? Well, the language and the narrative, certainly. We'll examine the emotional ups and downs in this long psalm in a moment. But the outstanding feature of this psalm is its poetry. Indeed, Hebrew commentaries note that even the psalm title scans like a line of poetry. So, the singer, as we've noted, uses powerful imagery and metaphor, and this really enables us to feel the singer's pain and devastation. But the tone is also worth noting. Yes, the singer is speaking out of a profound sense of distress, but expresses this with absolute assurance, both that God can be addressed in this way and that God hears. So these opening verses, hear my prayer, Lord, let my cry reach you. Do not turn from me in my hour of need. When I call, listen, answer me at once. And this sense of assurance that God will listen runs through the psalm and is never overwhelmed. This makes it quite unique and unusual. Even though we immediately encounter some of the most poignant descriptions of desolation in the whole of the Psalter. This is from verse 4. For my days dissolve like smoke, my bones are burned to ash, my heart withers away like grass. I even forget to eat, so consumed am I with grief. My skin hangs on my bones. Like a gull lost in the desert, like an owl haunting the ruins, I keep a solitary watch, a lone bird on a roof. All day my enemies mock me. They make my name a curse. For bread I eat ashes. Tears salt my drink. You lifted me up in anger and threw me to the ground. My days pass into evening. I wither like the grass. So here we have the singer piling image upon image. My days are like smoke, bones burned to ash, so on. The gull in the desert. I think that's a particularly haunting image. And let's note, as we have done every week, the very effective use of parallelism, where the second half of the verse mirrors the first half of the verse. So the lost gull is immediately followed by the owl haunting the ruins, and so on through the psalm. This is an extraordinary piece of writing. The singer manages to sustain such an extraordinary, bleak description of the human condition, but with a tone of profound assurance, which receives full expression in the following stanzas. This is from verse 13. But you, Lord, preside forever. Every age remembers you. Rise with mercy for Zion, for now is the time for pity. Your servants treasure every stone. They cherish even the rubble. In these verses, the psalm changes gear. Up to verse 13, it's a reflection on personal suffering and devastation. But now the scope widens massively. Rise with mercy for Zion. Some authorities suggest this part of the psalm has been grafted on to earlier sections. That's purely speculative. I hate it when people do that unless there's a very obvious reason why that might be the case. The text is the text as we have received it. And we need to interpret it, I would suggest, as it stands, not as it might have been. That way lies immense danger, as you can imagine. So the singer sees his own sense of disintegration mirrored in the ruins of the city. So this is very much the time of the Babylonian exile, the destruction of the temple, that sense of massive loss that runs through the scriptures at this point. But crucially, the city and the person both share the same hope for restoration, even in their apparently ruined state. That, the singer says, is the nature of God's mercy for a wrecked person as much as for a wrecked city. The singer's canvas grows. It grows even wider as he states the grounds for his confidence. Verse 16 onwards. Nations will fear your name. Your glory will humble kings. When you rebuild Zion's walls, you will appear in glory, Lord. You hear the homeless pleading and do not mock their prayer. So this is what salvation looks like in Psalm 102. And the psalmist now, in part at least, explains the purpose of the psalm. Write this down for those to come, a people created to praise the Lord. The Lord watches from on high, searches the earth from heaven. So this psalm is in a sense an act of testimony. This is the kind of God we know, the one who brings us back, restores the person, restores the city, brings back the exile. Again, in words that recall the prophets, God's rescue is a universal promise. From verse 21, God hears the prisoner's groan and sets the doomed free to sing the Lord's name in Zion. God's praise in Jerusalem. There the nations and peoples gather to serve the Lord. What a high point, what a high point. I mean, it could end there, couldn't it? Like so many psalms, we've got to the point, haven't we? No. Suddenly, and we're used to this, Psalm 6, Psalm 30, all these psalms we've been studying, everything falls apart again. Everything falls apart. Just when the singer has grasped hold of a new future, everything collapses. Verse 24, God has broken me in my prime, has cut short my days. I say, my God, do not take me. My life is only half spent, while you live from age to age. And I would suggest, as I have before in this course, that this pattern that recurs regularly in the Psalms has a deep resonance with our own experience. It is often as we begin to recover that we turn out to be most vulnerable. That seems to be almost a truth of human nature. But here, just as the singer is descending into despair, he finds a voice to make this quite extraordinary confession of faith. This is 26 to the end. Long ago you made the earth. The heavens too are your work. Should they decay, you remain. Should they wear out like a robe, like clothing changed and thrown away, you are still the same. Your years will never end. May your servant's line last forever. Our children grow strong before you. It's an extraordinary ending. After all the ups and downs, the gull lost in the desert, the owl in the ruins, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the assurance that the God who has proved faithful is faithful. Now, again, long ago you made the earth. The heavens too are your work. Should they decay, you remain. Should they wear out like a robe, like clothing changed and thrown away, you are still the same. Your years will never end. May your servant's line last forever. Our children grow strong before you. Well, that's it really. Quite short for me. My invitation this week is to spend some time with this psalm. Say it out loud in whatever version you find most helpful, unless you get too embarrassed to do that, but it's great poetry. And to enjoy the deeply poetic language, words which the psalmist has given to us to express our own darkest fears and our highest hopes to God, always sharing his assurance that God is the God who saves. A phrase itself that again recurs time after time throughout the book of Psalms.